So let's get started. Thank you to everyone for joining us today for Ask Us Anything, What We're Reading Now. And to get started, we just have a few announcements. So tomorrow night, we have an online class with Antonio Ruiz Camacho on twisting facts into stories, reality in fiction and nonfiction. And the registration for that closes tomorrow at 5 p.m., so you still have time to register. Members, open office hours, we have extended open office hours for however long we're going to be here. And so we're going to be doing open office hours every Wednesday from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. all over the phone. And if you'd like to book an appointment, email member@writersleague.org. And BookPeople, we have partnered with BookPeople for this event. So we'll be sharing a link with all of you so you can purchase the books that we've mentioned tonight. So buy books, support indie bookstores. And we'll also send you an email with all of the books listed, as well as a link to the webinar on our YouTube channel. So all of the books from the last time that we did this, as well as the books today, will be on that website. And we have a YouTube channel where we'll be uploading all of these videos as well. And next up with WLT, writing during a pandemic, tools and tips for keeping your creative life going right now. Next Tuesday, March 31st, join us for a live webinar here. With some panelists, and this should be a really interesting topic.
Yeah, so we're finding some great writers who are, I think I've been on Twitter a little more than I should be, and I've certainly seen a lot of writers talk about their challenges with staying focused, and people sort of laughingly saying, oh, you should write a novel while you have all this time. But the reality is that, we all have a lot on our minds. So I think it'll be really interesting to hear from some writers who can give us some ideas of how they're coping and how they're approaching their creativity and their creative production during this time. So that is happening. And the reason it says time to be determined is because we want to make sure that we're making these webinars as accessible as we can be, the live version, for as many people who might be interested in them. So if you guys sometime tonight during the chat, if you wanted to just let us know your opinion, whether a 6:30 start time is a good start time, or if you think something more like an 8 o'clock start time, which might be a little bit easier for some parents out there, would be a better start time. And you're welcome to just drop in your thoughts and we'll take a look at them afterwards and figure out what time we're going to do this next week. Okay, next Tuesday. And is it still me, Sam?
Yes.
Okay, so then the other thing hi guys, I'm Becca Oliver. We're gonna all introduce ourselves as we take our turn tonight, but my name is Becca Oliver. I'm the Executive Director here at the Writers League. Thank you so much for joining us and for being up for spending some time in the evenings whenever we're able to do it with this big community. So the idea behind tonight's event is we want to give you the opportunity to share what you're reading. We want to talk a little bit about some of the books that we've been reading and are excited about. We have a ton of slides from folks who sent in some information about the books they've been reading. And as we're talking, I would encourage you to use the chat box, because I think one thing we discovered on Thursday night when we did our panel discussion is that the chat box is such a great place for little conversations to just take place over the course of a live event like this. So if we start talking about a book that you've read and you want to offer your 2 cents, please do that. If you have another book that you think, if we like this book, we might love this book, feel free to add that to the chat box. Just anything and everything to keep the conversation going. For this one, we aren't going to be using anyone else's audio and certainly not anyone else's video, since we have so many panelists on here, but we will be showing slides and giving name checks to some of the folks who sent in their information. Unfortunately, we weren't able to use every single one because we figured you guys didn't want to be here until midnight. But we're going to try to get them all out in a list to you after this for sure, with a link. And then also, again, great idea to support indie booksellers right now, especially. So we'll make sure that you get the link to, for this event, the BookPeople store. But we are planning to do events that support booksellers all over Texas, indie booksellers all over Texas. So I think that is it. So we're going to go in turn with one staff member and then some of the slides, and then a staff member and some of the slides. And then we're going to end with our special guest, who is our conference director for the 2020 conference, but also has a book publishing on March 31st that we are so excited to celebrate with him. So we're going to end with Richard Santos and some of his wonderful recommendations as well. Okay.
Thank you, Becca. Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
We're glad to have you. All right, so guys, we're going to kick it off with Sam, and everybody just be sure to introduce yourselves when you start your round.
Okay, I'm Sam. I'm the program director and the member service director for WLT. So I'm reading a lot of different things right now, but the two books I'm focusing on today are The Hating Game by Sally Thornton and Sabrina and Corina by Callie Fajardo Astin. So the first book I'll talk about is The Hating Game. I love this book so much. This is the third time that I'm reading it. And I'll just say romance is one of my favorite genres. And it just makes me incredibly happy every single time I read a good romance. And I think, you know, with everything that's going on, I found myself really wanting to read something that's not going to make me sad or upset. And this is a book that I gravitated towards. And I just love this book so much because it is the enemies to lovers trope done so well. And romance is hard. I think we had a Third Thursday panel a couple of months ago where someone said, if you're having trouble with the middle of writing your novel, or writing the middle part of your novel, read romance, because you know that these characters are going to end up together, but at the same time, like, you have to keep the pacing up. There has to be enough conflicts that you are believing that maybe they won't end up together. And I think that this book does that really well. And so the next book I'm reading, Sabrina and Corina, it was a National Book Award finalist this last year. I haven't finished it yet. I've just read the first two short stories, but they are so incredibly beautiful. One word I might use to describe the first two stories I've read is just like incredibly rich. Like the imagery, the language, the culture, like it is all there and it is so gorgeous. Yeah, and it just talks about, it talks a lot about women, sisters, mothers and daughters, grandmothers, the violence that women experience. And it kind of meditates on all of these different things. And I think the intersections in this book, Callie is an Indigenous Latina, and there's a huge community of Indigenous Latinos in Colorado, which I myself wasn't really aware of. And I think this book is just a beautiful glimpse into that culture. Yeah, those are my two books.
Sam, great job. And panelists, I just want to say you guys are welcome to jump in if you've read something. Richard, have you read Sabrina and Corina?
Yeah, I did. I thought it was great. I thought the depiction of the setting, the location is just really, really fresh and vivid. It's just really great writing overall. Yeah, really. Some of the stories are really like wrenching. Some are pretty like kind of funny, just all over the place.
Awesome. Yeah. And Sam, you didn't see it, but I asked if people have other books. I love that you said you read the first book for the third time. And so some folks are saying books like The World According to Garp, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, as I believe books that they've also read at least 3 times. And anyone else who wants to add something to the chat box about that. I have a friend who has read The Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham every year for like the last 20 years. And I would love to find a book like that I want to read every year. Okay, sorry, Sam, go ahead.
Okay, so next we have a few recommendations from our members.
Maybe not members, just people who are in our community.
So Callie H recommends Red, White, and Royal Blue. I actually have read this book and I love this book. so I can talk about it a little. But Callie H says, this book was everything about what it's like to date and fall in love in the digital age, and exactly what you would expect from young adults growing up in the fishbowl of the White House or royal family. But for all that you can see where the pitfalls and struggles lie ahead for these characters, it is impossible to put down. This book is snarky, bitchy, hilariously funny, smart, witty, and completely binge-worthy. And I agree. I read this book in an entire night, and I could not put it down. And it's just like, it's so good because you wouldn't expect, you know, to read a gay romance about the first son of the United States and the prince from the royal family. Like, it's just so insane, but it is so good. And yeah, I absolutely love this book.
Is it a Texas author too, Sam?
Yeah, Casey McQuisition is actually a Texas author. I think I did a review for this book a couple of months ago, too.
You did, I remember. Cool.
Yeah.
And a great jacket.
Okay, next book. Oops, sorry, I have to mess with my thing. Dixie E. recommends The Secrets We Kept by Laura Prescott. It offers an interesting blend of fact and fiction involving the CIA and Dr. Zhivago. Besides that, we're supporting an Austin author. I actually haven't read this book, but I have heard a lot of good things about it, and Laura Prescott is an Austin author, so that is really cool.
And I think it was a #1 New York Times bestseller, so there's that.
Yeah. And Reese's book club pick.
Oh, Reese's book club.
I'll say about that book, I've never read Dr. Zhivago. I don't really know anything about Boris Pasternak, but I thought that Laura's book was great. Still suspenseful, really intriguing. Just a great read overall.
Cool. She's a really nice person too. So it's always nice when good things happen to really nice people.
Next, Stacy S. recommends Frankenstein by Jeanette Winterson. So weird, weirdest thing I've read in ages. It's uneven but worthwhile. This book sounds really cool. I haven't read it either, but I've heard a lot of good things.
Has anyone read anything by Jeanette Winterson?
Yes.
I haven't, and she's an author that I've always wanted to read, and maybe this will be my inspiration to pick something up during this.
I read Wait. It's her retelling of the Hercules myth. It is really good. I enjoyed it.
Oh gosh. Okay, cool. Good suggestion. I wonder who Stacy S. could be. Is it someone we know? Is it someone who teaches for us? I don't know, guys. It's a mystery. Okay, guys, remember in the chat box, if you're sending notes, do all panelists and attendees, or it's only coming to the people whose heads you can see. Thanks.
Okay, Annette P. recommends A Place for Us by Fatima Farine Mirza. Brilliant structure, modular, non-linear, underlining how being different is experienced by various family members and their tight-knit Indian American community and larger American one, as well as within the family itself. That sounds really interesting. I haven't read this book either, actually. Okay, next. Christine B. recommends Rules of Civility by Amor Towles. Set in 1938, this book takes the reader back to New York City society in the years just before World War II. Told through the voice of Katie, a young woman striving to climb the social ladder. This story brings us into the different neighborhoods of New York City and the lives of rich and poor alike. This book had special meaning for me as my parents grew up in one of these neighborhoods. I felt like I was back walking the streets of Greenwich Village. That sounds incredibly interesting.
I haven't read this book, but I did work with the agent for this book. Does that count? And I do remember when it came out, how many people were reading it and loving it. But I also just love, having lived in New York, I love books, any book that takes me to a place where I've lived and where I can walk the streets again. And for me, New York City would be one of those places I love. So I definitely need to check this one out.
Anonymous recommends Lion of Ireland, Morgan Llewellyn. Okay. So part fiction and part historical. It's a fascinating read. And there's going to be a mini series based on it. That's really cool.
Yeah. So if you like historical fiction, this might be one for you.
And it was a New York Times bestseller.
What?
And now for Kelsey.
Hey guys, it's my turn now. So my name is Kelsey. I am the office manager for the Writers League of Texas. Super happy to be here. Talking about books is one of my favorite things of all time. So the first book I have is this chapbook, super beautiful cover, called Threshold by Julie Howd. And it is an incredible book of poetry. It is published by Host Publications, which is local to Austin. So shout out to our local Austin literary community. There's so many things that I could say about this book. I loved it very dearly. I think you could say this about a lot of poetry books, but I found it very empathetic and beautiful. There's a really solid, dedicated structure to every poem in this book, which I really appreciate. It kind of makes the experience of reading it really uniform and beautiful. And also it kind of, you know, because it has this dedicated structure, it can like really explore a lot of different elements. So it's about the human condition. It's about how the human condition connects to the earth, and it's stunning. And if you guys don't mind, I was gonna read a little poem.
Oh my goodness.
Like give a little
Kelsey, we would love that.
So I'm gonna go ahead and read the titular poem, Threshold. It's short and sweet, so I hope you like it. So it's called Threshold. Is it true that pure joy is bodiless? I'm shaking my fist into the mirror and laughing. Is there pressure to be a painting? Is the academy a raw egg? My splinter has grown into a cactus sunning on my fingertip. The lilac exits geometry. Even elephants are afraid and die alone. Is it yesterday or tomorrow that you said, now we are safe? It's difficult to recall the future unless in dreams. Nevertheless, I supplement in the valley. There is a voice here that is speaking to me from inside my head, and that's it. So it's so beautiful. Please check it out. I think it's only $10. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it from the Host Publications website itself. So definitely check out Threshold.
Kelsey, I also think that's a good point that poetry right now, especially, I have a big poetry shelf and a lot of books that I haven't read. And I find myself every morning going to one that I've never read before and just trying to read a few poems to kind of, I don't know, it just feels good to read poetry right now. So if anyone has poets that they would recommend, I'd love to hear them, and feel free to mention them in the chat. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other panelists who want to do a live reading are welcome.
And definitely get that book from Host, because once they run out of a printing, they're gone.
That's true.
They don't do any reprintings. So you got to jump on that while you can.
It's true. Very special. So that was the first book. The second book is this one here. Super cool cover again. It's called The Lady from the Black Lagoon, Hollywood Monsters and the Lost Legacy of Millicent Patrick. I'm a really big horror fan, for those who know me. I write horror short stories, so this was an obvious choice for me. It's a book, and it's by Mallory O'Meara, I believe is how you say it, who is a horror filmmaker, and she's really cool. So the book kind of follows the story of Millicent Patrick, who is the person who designed the Gill Man from Creature from the Black Lagoon, but essentially got zero credit because, 1950s, you know how it goes.
Now tell us, Kelsey.
Especially in the film industry, women do not have a lot of places to kind of direct or create or get credit for the things. A lot of women who have worked in film have not really gotten the credit that they deserve. And so that's kind of the overall, arching theme of this book is, here is how it is to be a woman creating film. Here is how it is to find this wonderful discovery and not be able to find any details on her because essentially Hollywood has decided that she wasn't important. So it's about being a woman creating horror, and it's about finding kind of this legacy of Melissa and Patrick. And I am not too far into it, but I am obsessed with it, and so I would highly recommend it. I think it is a really good read. And horror can be really fun when it's really scary, because you can kind of have a safe space to like process some intense feelings. So that would be my two like for this time book recommendations.
Thank you.
And then we have more recommendations for you from the people who sent in the Google form. The first is from Nina H. She recommends this book that has an amazing title, 10 Minutes, 38 Seconds in This Strange World by Elif Shafak. And I love this quote. It says, "The narrator is dead. Well, almost." I mean,
what does that mean?
Nina, tell us, what does it mean? Guess
Nina,
we'll have to
are you out there? Tell us more. A great jacket and I love that title. It's really long, but I like it.
So the next one we have is from Annette P. She recommends The Library Book by Susan Orlean. She says, "This is for anyone who loves words and books." That's all of us. We should read this. A love letter to reading. Haven't read it myself, but I'm very curious too. And so the next one we have is from Sumaya M. They recommend Unmarriageable by Sonia Kamal. It says, "It makes me feel good, easy read, and very entertaining. I actually laughed out loud in some parts." So you know how that is. You're laughing out loud. That's a good recommendation. The next one we have is from Debbie D. She recommends You Are Not Alone by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekanen. She said, "I picked it up because it is written by two women that write together. I also write with a co-author, and that piqued my interest after listening to their YouTube about working together. However, it is really great with plot twists that I honestly didn't see coming, and I love that."
And I can tell you a little fun fact, and that is that Greer Hendricks she might still be an editor in publishing. So she's worked on a lot of big best-selling novels, most of them in the women's fiction space, I want to say. She may have been Jodi Picoult's editor, but please don't tell anyone else I said that, because I could be wrong. But she was in publishing for a long time and probably has a really good idea of how to create plot and how to keep characters interesting. So it might be an interesting read for folks who are looking at writing in this genre.
Next up, we have a recommendation from Lane L. They recommend Havana Nocturne by T.J. English, and say, "It's about one of the more interesting chapters in the lives of several very interesting historic figures. The mafia tried to make Cuba into a mob-owned nation, and they were about to get away with it when a young communist named Castro showed up." Pretty interesting. So the next one we have from Callie H. recommends House of Earth by Sarah J. Maas. Says this book is such a wonderful, interesting take on a fantasy setting. And main character is a wonderful mess of a person who struggles to make good choices, whomst among us, and do the right thing while also seeking vengeance. The setting is amazing. The plot is awesome. The characters feel so real. And Sarah J. Maas has, great books for relationships, which I think is really cool. I love books about relationships. I think it's cool that it's between friends, siblings, lovers, enemies, reluctant allies, or anything you can think of. She writes amazing relationships that leave you laughing or crying or cringing or grieving. The book is phenomenal, but its characters and their relationships will have me reading it again and again. So I think that's a really awesome review.
This is one of the books that Jillian Redfern mentioned on our Third Thursday panel discussion last week, is one of the books that she's really, really excited about, this, I think, start to a trilogy.
That's cool. And the next one up we have from Cheryl W. Recommends The Weight of Zero by Karen Fortunati. A true representation of mental illness in teens. I think that is great. I haven't read it myself, but I think it sounds awesome.
Yeah, there's a really wide spectrum of books that are recommended tonight, and it was a lot of fun putting the slideshow together to see that there's stuff in narrative nonfiction, practical nonfiction, like this book. I mean, I think anyone out there struggling with working or having a child or a friend who does, or somebody who's dealing with mental illness, this could be a great recommendation for you. But then other really interesting narrative nonfiction stuff. Novels. So I'm excited. I'll stop talking so Evan can go.
Hey everyone, I'm Evan. I'm a project specialist for WLT. I know it seems my books are very different from each other, but there is a theme. They are both foreign books. That's the one thing I can think of. So first off, we got Pride and Prejudice. Here's my copy right here. I mean, what can I say about this book other than that it's so fantastic? And I'm currently rereading it because I just love it so much. Like every time I open it up, it surprises me. Jane Austen's voice is just so dry and sharp and witty, and it blows my mind how readable this book is today, considering, its contemporaries. Really, I agree, Sarah. My other book is called All You Need Is Kill. This is a really, really great sci-fi book. It's, I believe so, there will be a replay. But All You Need Is Kill is a great sci-fi book. It's about aliens have invaded the Earth and humanity is struggling to fight against them. And this one guy, Keiji Kiria, suddenly gets this ability to relive his life from a certain day every time he dies. It's very Groundhog's Day. So he keeps going back and forth to try and figure out how to win the war. And actually, it was made into a movie.
Yes, with Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, right?
Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, Live, Die, Repeat, The Edge of Tomorrow.
Love
How
that
do you feel
movie.
about Tom Cruise? It's a great movie. It's completely different from the book.
Okay.
Like completely different characters, situations, and everything, but still a good movie. And it's based on that book. I recommend
The
the
cover,
book.
Evan, is that is it a graphic novel or is it a straight text only novel?
It's text. There is a graphic novel adaptation. The artist is the guy who did Death Note, for those who know about that. But the novels, I mean, all the adaptations I found of this are all great. The novels dives in the most detail, of course, and it's great. The translation into English by Joseph Reeder and Alexander O. Smith, they did a great job. I recommend it.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. So let's see what Dorothy recommends. Paula Coelho's The Spy. She says, not only does Coelho write an intriguing story of the famed Mata Hari, but an even more thought-provoking and rule-pushing story of a woman who just wants to be herself, free from societal subjugation. Coelho's writing lingers with you and begs us to ask questions of ourselves and how we see others. I haven't read it. Oh, they wrote The Alchemist. I've never read that, actually. Seemed interesting. Jennifer M. recommends The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. She says, the language in this book and the author's ability to paint with words is just breathtaking. The story includes various discussions of the art of writing, which struck me as both meta and interesting, but the book's core appeal for me is simply the artistry with which she writes.
Yeah, and Erin Morgenstern wrote a huge book several years ago, The Night Circus. So if you don't recognize her name, but you've read The Night Circus, I would imagine that this book, The Starless Sea, which got some really great reviews, might be something for you.
Marion W. recommends Hilary Mantel's The Mirror and the Light. The writing is lush, detailed, pulling the reader into Cromwell's ever-darkening consciousness after the death of Anne Boleyn. and the 4 young men he had a hand in putting to death. That sounds like quite the interesting book. I haven't read it.
And she wrote Wolf Hall, a huge bestseller. She's an amazing UK-based historical novelist.
Of course, Lindsey recommends The Haunting of Hill House. I see you in the chat as well, Lindsey. It's a classic for a reason. It's your 3rd time reading it. Oh man, after the Netflix series came out, I wanted to read it, but I haven't had a chance to pick it up yet. But the Netflix show was quite chilling.
I loved that show.
Oh, the book is better.
The book is better.
I believe it.
Much better.
They're always better. Although that might be a fun thing to add to the chat. Anyone who can think of a movie that is better than the book. Ooh, that sounds like a good challenge. I'm going to think about it myself.
If we're talking about adaptations, I just watched the adaptation of High Fidelity that Hulu put out recently. It's really good.
Oh yeah, I want to see that. Did you see the movie High Fidelity with John Cusack?
I did. I love it.
Were you alive when the movie High Fidelity with John Cusack came out?
It was 99. I was alive.
We'll move on.
All right. Janelle E. recommends The Shepherd's Hut by Tim Winton. The Shepherd's Hunt is a coming-of-age novel like nothing I've read before, both in terms of plot, story, and craft. It is lyrical, raw, and I wasn't sure whether I loved or hated the teenage protagonist on his coming-of-age story. But I stuck with it, and it stuck with me. Ooh.
Oh, it's my turn. Hi, everyone. So these are the books the book that I'm just finished is Kate Atkinson, Big Sky. And I don't know if you guys have read the other books that she's done with this main character, Jackson Brody, who's he's an investigator. He's a guy who just finds himself in the middle of all sorts of quagmires, but has an interesting past of his own. And her first book that featured him was called Case Histories. And it is hands down one of my favorite books in the last 15 years. I don't even know, it might be older than that now, but I go back to it again and again. She's so great. She's so great at, if you like mysteries or novels that have multiple threads and the writer introduces you slowly to storylines that feel like they are completely unrelated and there's no way that they're going to come together, and then they bring it all together in a really surprising and satisfying way. That is Kate Atkinson with these books. And I also, so Case Histories, and then the other one, there are a few more, but I would recommend one called When Will There Be Good News, which I think is one of my favorite titles as well. And I haven't seen the Jackson Brody BBC series, but I need to see it. And then I'll also mention that she wrote a book called Life After Life that I also thought was really beautiful a few years ago. So she's just an amazing, amazing writer. Thanks, Richard. Oh, you stockpiled, but you haven't started yet. Okay. Case Histories, buddy. Start with Case Histories. I agree, Chris. Okay. So I can't recommend her enough. And then I just started Kathy Valentine's memoir, All I Ever Wanted. I think that for those of you who don't know, Kathy Valentine lives here in Austin. She's a former member of the Go-Go's. She is such a badass. Female rocker who just talks about her, just really candidly, her life in music, the people she met, the addiction she struggled through, the sort of what it was like to be a female rocker at a really interesting time in music history, and then about this band that was, I think, really important to a lot of people and also had its own kind of rocky history. So I think she's such a cool woman. I saw her read at the One Page Salon that Owen Edgerton does a couple months ago. She read from this memoir, and it was beautiful. She's a wonderful writer. So, and also she did a soundtrack for the memoir. So she put together, I think it must be like a Spotify playlist or something, but she wrote original music to a company that sort of told additional stories that she wasn't able to include in the memoir. And it's also published by a local publisher. It's published by UT Press. So I would just say that's another way to support some local publishers too. All right.
Did you see Tony's message about having his hair cut by Kathy Valentine when he was a kid?
Oh, wait, Kathy Valentine's mother used to cut your hair when you had hair. That's awesome. Right, Tony? We'll have to see if you're in the book. I'll check the index. Okay, so then we're going to move on to some more recommendations from wonderful people. This was an abundance of recommendations from Marlene M. And she says that each of the first 4 titles that you see here have helped her grow in different ways. The Gardner recommendation is simply fun reading. She tells a great story that you don't see coming, or at least I don't. And I'll just echo that for Meg Gardner. She's just really such a cool lady, such a supportive and wonderful author who lives here also in Austin. But she tells a really scary and surprising story. So check her out. And then there's just some really great, again, interesting nonfiction books here, whether it's the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, Holy Guacamole, Soul Revolution, and Start With Why. So check them out, guys. This is one that I saw earlier today and thought, I really want to read this book. I want to know what it's about. Linda L. recommends The Professor and the Parson, a story of desire, deceit, and defrocking by Adam Sisman. And this is a biography of a con man, who doesn't love a con man, who lives under 2 fake identities. It is fascinating. So if you're into that, guys, if you're into that sort of catch me if you can kind of story, this could be for you. All right, this is another one that I was really interested in. Tandy G recommends she recommends Fools Are Everywhere. And it is a great insight into the history and culture of jesters throughout the world. And I feel like it's probably one of those books that when you start reading it, you realize you didn't know that you wanted to know everything there was to know about jesters, but you do. So I'm into it. Charlotte recommends, okay, this one I picked for a specific reason. So she recommends Robert Galbraith's Career of Evil, which I'll mention if you guys don't know that Robert Galbraith is a pseudonym for J.K. Rowling. If you don't know who J.K. Rowling is, she wrote this really charming small series of books that one day we're sure are going to take off. Just kidding. She wrote Harry Potter. So Charlotte says about this book, many readers may already know the Cormoran Strike detective novels, but they were new news to me. I'm reading the 3rd in the series. The Cuckoo's Calling and Silkworm are the other 2. Not only does the author feed out the whodunit plot in small, tantalizing bits, but she also unfolds the multifaceted relationship between Strike and his assistant Robin, little by little, keeping the reader turning pages to see where it all leads. And I would say I absolutely agree. I've read the first 3 books in the series, and I just bought the 4th book from BookPeople when I was ordering Richard Santos's book. Those were the 2 books I bought from BookPeople the first day I decided to try to single-handedly save independent bookstores. And it's so, these are so good. And the relationship between Strike and his assistant Robin, absolutely. It's almost like, I know I'm dating myself here, but I'll say it reminds me a lot of Moonlighting with Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd. Has anyone on the panel ever seen Moonlighting? Richard, come on, buddy. Has anyone out there seen Moonlighting? It's just that really great, relationship where they're driving each other crazy, but you also know ultimately like they are going to get together, but they haven't yet. So I'm not spoiling anything. Okay, sorry. Tony B recommends The Overstory by Richard Powers, which got so much attention in the last year. He says it enhanced my view of nature's importance to our survival. And I'll just say that I read the first chapter of this. I haven't read the entire book, but wow, what a beautiful, beautiful writer, of course, that Richard Powers is. But it's just, even that first piece of it has sort of sat with me for a long time. So Tony, I'm glad to hear that you really enjoyed it. It's a long book, so if you guys are looking for something to occupy your time, The Overstory might be that. And then Gina recommends Recursion by Blake Crouch. I just finished reading this book and love the questions it brings up about preserving memory, our memory versus reality, and how that influences what we think about our past. What event in the past would you go and try to change or relive? It's not only a science fiction story, but also a love story. And I chose this one to also talk about because I have read his first book, Dark Matter, which sort of sounds exactly like, you know, it's working with some of the similar themes, but it's all about multiple realities. So multiple universes. So the ability to enter into another space where you exist. And if you had taken a different turn in your life, that's where you would have been. And I'm doing a horrible job of describing it, but it's a really cool and interesting book. And I imagine that this book is equally so. So Gina, have you read Dark Matter? Did you read that first book? I don't know if she's chatting with us still or not. Oh, we'll find out in the chat. Okay. I think that might be it for me. No. Okay. Geraldine C recommends Louise Erdrich, The Roundhouse. And she said she enjoyed this book because it was a look at Native American beliefs and culture. It also won the National Book Award several years ago. And I read this book as well. And I'll say that it is a murder mystery. It's a murder mystery set against the backdrop of a reservation. And it's just really, really beautifully written. And she's a great writer. Anyone else read?
I would recommend any of her books, and she does this amazing thing where a lot of her books will follow the same family over generations, or the kind of brother who just appears in a few chapters in one book has 3 books written just about him that come afterwards. It really sort of branches. She's got a whole universe out there.
Yeah.
Just start anywhere. Just pick them all up. They're just all great.
Awesome. Thanks, Richard.
She'll probably be our next American writer to win the Nobel Prize, in my estimation.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. All right. I've got several books. I wanted to talk about like 12, but Becca said 12 was too many. So I'm going to limit it to...
Hey, look, if you mention a couple others, it's fine.
This is The Lost Book of Adana Moreau by Michael Zapata. This is a debut novel. This came out in January. It's great, fascinating, really kind of a trippy story about, it's hard to describe the plot, so I'm going to tell you some of the things that appear in it. There are lost manuscripts by mysterious sci-fi authors. There's parallel universes. There's pirates. The characters come together in New Orleans just for Hurricane Katrina. Jumps back and forth in time. Great book for fans of everyone from Jorge Luis Borges to Samuel Delany and Octavia Butler, just other writers who aren't afraid to get weird and fantastical, but are still telling a really strong literary story first of all. Also, Tigers Not Daughters by Samantha Mabry. This book is out today. Today is a publication date, so you should still be able to order it from BookPeople or anywhere else. Mabry is a Texas writer. This book is set in San Antonio. The chapters alternate POV between each of the Torres sisters. The youngest is 12 and the oldest is 16. And at the beginning, just before the novel starts, Ana Torres, the older sister, she's 18. She falls from her second-story window to her death in the middle of the night. It's a great book about sisterhood, about San Antonio, about trauma, but it's also a ghost story. Ana starts coming back, maybe, and the sisters have to figure out what's going on while also dealing with their father, who's just falling apart, abusive boyfriends, neighborhood, all sorts of stuff. So get Tigers Not Daughters. Her previous book, All the Wind in the World, was on the long list for the National Book Award, which I would also recommend.
She's also a really nice person and did an event for us in Dallas a couple of years ago, and just seems like a just really down-to-earth, great writer. So support her. Her book's publishing today, guys. Let's give her some love.
Speaking of great writers, Amy Gentry's Last Woman Standing. I think this is the paperback cover. This came out last year. It's her second book after Good Is Gone, which if you haven't read that, you have to read that as well. This is about a woman named Dana Diaz, who's a comedian here in Austin, struggling to get back on her feet after moving back to Texas from Hollywood. She's just kind of treading water, not really making an impact on the comedy scenes, not quite sure what to do with herself. And in the opening chapter, her set just crashes. She just burns. She also has a sexist heckler that she has to deal with. And in this first chapter, she also meets a friend, and they eventually start to decide to do something about all the terrible men in their lives. This is the one that I'm reading now. Things are starting to get very intense and suspenseful. It's told with like just enough rage and anger to keep you going while also being quite mysterious. I think it's a great one.
And I read this book too. I thought it was such an inventive, I think, new twist on this sort of revenge thriller, which I loved. I would also, though, for those of you looking to discover Amy Gentry, I would also say her first book is really surprising and just wonderfully, like brilliantly, I think, plotted in terms of the way that she tells the story. It's a story where you're not sure who might be telling the truth about their identity, and she really lets you she keeps you guessing until the very end, which is hard. So she's another person who's just a really cool, down-to-earth, great writer who is supportive of other writers.
People always say that a book kept them up all night turning the pages, and I never, people you get tired, go to bed, right? But like, honestly, I have several friends who said that actually happened to them with Good Is Gone.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Totally agree.
Okay, so let me read to you what Sarah N. recommends. A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. Italy looms large as a character in this book, and it's a powerful way to keep the country in mind as we navigate this global crisis. All of this story's characters have such rich, immersive interior lives that readers can easily feel less isolated as they listen to their conversations and sympathize or even feel angry with their struggles. It's dramatic, funny, philosophical, romantic, and ultimately a story of how exciting transformation becomes when we let go of our fear of the familiar. I haven't read any Forster, but this is the kind of book where I'd recommend just grab that classic off the shelf that you should read. Because taking some time to get transported to 19th century Russia or Italy or early 20th century Italy, it's going to be a good way to spend some of this time, I think. Elizabeth B. recommends Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. A wonderful, well-written book about God's redeeming love. Interesting. Haruki Murakami, this is After Dark. This is recommended by Melinda W. Talk about someone who has a whole bookshelf of books to keep you busy for many, 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 many weeks. Murakami would be a great one to go with. He's got amazing short stories. Novels are all very strange and innovative. He wrote a book about running, which I really, really liked. I listened to the audiobook of it. And that was really fascinating. Melinda's recommendation is Starts in a Denny's. And that's how you know it's going to be good.
I mean, that gets my vote. A lot of stuff starts in a Denny's, guys. Am I right?
Sherry J. recommends Stories from the Stoop by Steve Bernstein. A memoir that is timeless and yet particularly relevant for the divided political climate we are living in. Steve Bernstein's writing is a call from the soul for humanity to wake up and realize we are more alike than different. This is all accomplished through his gift for storytelling. Interesting. I don't know about this book.
One Murakami, I had to run to the other room to get my Murakami books. Dance, Dance, Dance. It's 2 books, but it's a really trippy, crazy book. There's a main character turns into a sheep. He's depressed. It's crazy.
What's it
I
called?
recommend.
What's it called, Evan?
Dance, Dance, Dance.
Okay, by Murakami. Okay.
Yeah, you got to know what you're getting into when you pick up one of his books. Guys turning into sheep, totally normal in his books.
Did you dance into the other room to get it?
I had to. I was like, what, Murakami? Let me go get them. These are in Japanese. I could barely understand what was happening. But it's a lot of fun.
Gary M. recommends The Radium Girls, The Dark Story of America's Shining Women by Kate Moore, which is a book I've been meaning to read since it came out, but haven't. Gary says, I'd heard of these women for years, but knew little about what happened. Horrific and tragic story of industrial greed, the lethal abuse of workers, and almost total refusal of government to regulate an industry that literally killed its employees for profit. Yeah, it's supposed to be an amazing book.
Yeah, I got a ton of attention when it came out. Oh, what's that book you just flipped to, Santa?
I have one myself. Look at that.
So guys, we just wanted to also make sure that you knew that Richard's novel, Trust Me, is coming out on March 31st, and we're so excited for him. Can you tell us just a little bit about the book, Richard?
Yeah, it's set in Santa Fe. It's a story about corruption, drug dealing, and land rights. The story is built around a development group that buys some land from a Native American pueblo in order to build an airport for Santa Fe, which if you've ever been to Santa Fe, you probably haven't been to their airport because it's about as small as can imagine.
I've been to the Santa Fe airport. It is so tiny that you can park right in front of it and go inside and you don't have to walk at all.
No, there's like 4 gates. It's amazing. It's like the South Terminal here in Austin, which is also kind of mysterious, and someone should write a book about that. But anyways, the construction plans fall apart when a skeleton is found on the site, which, since it's on a Native American pueblo, causes everything to stop. I've got a few characters that are followed in the book. One of them is a washed-up East Coast politico who's just desperate for a job. He gets a job offer out of the blue to come out to Santa Fe from DC to do PR for the airport. He takes it because he really doesn't have any other options. He gets out there and realizes that things are maybe a little bit more interesting and potentially dangerous than he realized. Another character named Gabe Luna loses his job on the airport site when construction stops. So he's broke. He also takes some mushrooms with a friend and has a hallucination that convinces him that he has bone cancer. So he's determined to reconnect with his estranged teenage son before he dies, which he thinks is imminent. So he has to decide how he's going to do that. He weighs whether or not he should double cross a dangerous friend in order to make that possible.
I'm not laughing at that. I'm laughing at Chester walking in front of Sam. We have a cat. We have our visitor cat. It sounds so wonderful, Richard. Now tell us a little bit about, I just want to know a little about, your how long did it take you to write the book? I think I've heard you talk about different drafts. I don't know, like we have writers on the line, we have writers listening in. What kind of advice can you give them for, getting through that debut novel and really like not, getting too frustrated if it's taking a little bit of time?
Yeah, this took a lot of time. It took a lot of time. I probably went through 3 complete drafts that I just tore down and rebuilt from the start, and tons of others where I would get, 10,000 words in and then have to restart. This novel has changed a lot. Like at one point, it was a very pulpish, kind of like road chase novel. More than once I was like, forget this, I'm just going to write a screenplay maybe. And then I got sidetracked on all of that. What I kept struggling with is just figuring out what the story I actually wanted to tell was. And I mean both the kind of like bigger concept of like the philosophical notion of what this book is about, but also literally like what is going to happen to the characters and what is going to get in their way and what's going to make it interesting to read. I think that this is, if you took my Write What You Know class, you heard me already talk about this, but I think I had really decided that, I used to work in politics. I used to live in Santa Fe and I'm going to write a book about that. And I think that was really difficult. I really should have just focused on telling the story instead of what I wanted it to be about, because that just didn't work. And I just had to keep rebuilding it and showing it to friends who incinerated it. I kept giving up, but for some reason kept going back to it.
Yeah.
And yeah, Tony, thanks for your question. You can pre-order this now. It's gonna get a little complicated, I think, with some books getting out. The on sale date is the 31st. Might show up a little bit later than that. I'm not entirely sure. I know that there are some copies out there that are available and should get there pretty quickly. Some of y'all might have to wait a little bit longer though, but yes, pre-order now and it will get to you as soon as it can.
Yeah, and I was able to buy a copy recently from BookPeople, so online. I bought it the other day, so they have some, and hopefully you guys can grab one before they're all gone. And you're being published by a Texas publisher too, right, Richard?
Yeah, Arte Publico Press. They're based out of Houston. They're legendary. They've been around for decades. They won the Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Book Critics Circle last year. It's really exciting. It was an honor for them to say that they wanted this book. I'd given up on it, literally given up on it, literally been like, that's fine. Everybody has a first. I've written a second book in the time, like in between drafts of this one. I wrote a complete second book.
Which is also a great thing for writers to hear, because I think sometimes we focus on one book and then forget that we could continue writing and start working on something else that might actually help us, like, not think about that other book for a little while. So I love hearing that.
Yeah, I think it took me about 6 years to get a draft of Trust Me that I liked. And I managed to get a draft of this second book in about 6 months. And I know it still needs some work, but I think it's like on its way in a way that feels really good.
I love it. So guys, we want to open it up. It is called Ask Us Anything. And so I want to say that we're going to do more of these. We're probably going to pick topics each time and maybe have a special guest or two that will be available to answer questions. I'm thinking about inviting a friend of the Writers Leagues who I know is looking for something to do in Phoenix, Kirby Kim. He's a literary agent, and see if Kirby wants to hop on one of these and just answer all of your questions. But if you guys have any questions for any of us here tonight, we're happy to try to answer them. We don't want to say goodbye just yet unless you're ready to say goodbye. So throw out any questions, or feel free to just conference is happening as scheduled at this time. We're moving forward. So great question. It's June 26th to the 28th, and we are full speed ahead. Richard, there's one for you.
Yeah. You wrote about the questions you wrote about Santa Fe after you left. Did you go back for research or draw on memory? A lot of it was memory. And some notes I had taken when I was living there. But I've been back several times after I had decent enough drafts, and was struck by how the city hadn't changed in a lot of ways. Even a lot of the shops are still like exactly the same. And I swear some of them have the same displays windows even somehow, which is kind of hilarious. It's an amazing city. I think everyone should go there. It's beautiful year round, and it's really fascinating. The history of that part of the world is incredibly fascinating.
Yeah, and it's only like 10 hours away.
Yeah, you could start now and be there before breakfast.
Somebody asked, I answered in the chat, but we do have our summer writing retreat this year, July 26th to the 31st. And we'll be in Kerrville, back at Schreiner University. For any of you who were there last year, we had a really great retreat, and it was a cool experience. It's a 6-day event that is usually about 5 classes of 20 students each, and you get the opportunity to just study with one instructor and then spend the afternoons writing and communing with folks. So more information on that Does anyone want to know anything about Chester?
Keeps making appearances.
I'd love to learn more about Chester myself.
I'm 2 years old.
Any other questions, guys? You have our full attention. If you don't have any questions, that's okay too. Oh, an acquaintance has asked me to proofread her technical business book. What is a good source to find what to charge? By the page, by the word, by the whole book? So I'll say that I think you could go to some other websites of folks who are doing that sort of editing and get an idea of what the ranges look like, what people are, the sorts of different fees that people are charging. I think you can find a lot of that on websites for other editorial folks. But I wonder, has anyone on this panel, Richard, have you done any freelance editing? You haven't, have you? You have?
Yeah. I'm on Yellowbird Editors roster
Gotcha.
of editors.
Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I would say it's also, I guess you say acquaintance and not friend, which is good because a friend would probably want a pretty steep discount, but maybe an acquaintance, you could keep it more professional, which is good. There's a group of freelance writers and editors, just kind of like, union's a strong word, but I think that's kind of what they would like to turn themselves into. I'll see if I can find some more information on that and post it in the chat here. But I would say that if this is going to be your first job, Charlotte, then you probably want to charge a little bit less. But if you've done a lot of these, then that's up to you.
And I would say my only advice, having done this like for a very short period of time between when I left New York and moved to Austin and before I started this job, is to just be really clear from the start what each of your expectations are. And especially if it's someone who you know already, just really understand what they're looking for and what you can give them. And whatever you think your due date should be, whatever you think your deadline should be, add like a month to it, because it never ends up being as quick a process as you might think it is.
And if they want it back super quickly, then they're not wanting you to do a good job.
Yeah. So I'm going to answer one question that I don't think everybody saw, but what sort of things are we supposed to use office hours for? So our open office hours is a member benefit that we offer. We usually offer it once a month. Now we're offering it once a week. And you can do a 30-minute meeting with a staff member. Most of them will probably happen with me. And honestly, it's whatever you might want to talk about. So I would say, I worked in publishing for many years and I was a literary agent. So oftentimes folks want to talk to me about the querying process and how you identify agents that you might query. But I'm happy to talk to you about anything and everything that you might be sort of mulling as a writer. Sometimes it's about offers that might have come in from agents or from small presses, or it might be about thinking about what your next project should be. You have 3 projects you want to work on. Which one is the one that you should really be focusing on? Anything you want to talk to another human being about out loud and just kind of bounce ideas off of them, then I'm happy to do that. So that's what open office hours are for. And I see that a lot of people are recommending young adult books. Do you guys, any of the panelists have any other Julie Murphy is Evan's favorite author.
I'll always talk about Julie Murphy.
What do you love about Julie Murphy?
I don't know. I feel like she's just so relatable. Like, she writes so empathetically with so much hope. I just appreciate all of her novels. Most recently, she put out a middle grade novel called Dear Sweet Pea, which I think got optioned by Disney for a TV show. And then I mentioned the chat. She also put out Puddin' a year or 2 ago, which is a follow-up to Dumplin', which was made into a Netflix movie. I love all her books. She's so great.
Yeah. I loved that movie, Dumplin'. I thought it was super fun. Jennifer Aniston, guys. She's America's friend.
Yeah, Samantha Mabry's books are young adult novels too. So I should have made that more clear when I gave that recommendation.
So Sarah says, not to be entirely cliche, but I'm curious for this about everyone. So you guys are welcome to answer in the chat too. How did the pandemic affect your writing process? If at all, were works in progress disrupted and or reimagined? And this is exactly, Sarah, what we're going to talk about next week on Tuesday with some writers. So definitely tune in to that or join us for that live webinar. But does anyone on the panel have anything they want to say about how this has impacted them as a writer?
I personally found it really hard to write. Whenever I'm like really anxious, it's hard for me to like sit down and, you know, get into the page or whatever. But I've tried some like mindfulness techniques and stuff like that, and that sort of helped, but I still find it kind of difficult to like really get into it.
Yeah. What kind of mindfulness techniques?
Meditating. There's this like podcast that Kelsey actually recommended to me. I think it's called like Shell's Meditation or something like that.
Yeah, it's the mindful mini meditations. You can find them on Spotify. They're like 10 minutes a piece.
Ooh. What is it called? It's called that, Mindful Mini Meditation?
Yes.
I'm writing that down.
With Shell Hamilton.
Shell Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
That Shell is in, oh, look at this Shell.
ATL.
Okay. Who else? Anyone else on the panel have anything to say?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been doing any writing. I also have a 9-month-old baby, so it's not like I was doing a lot of writing before the pandemic also, to be honest. But I think the key, whether you're a writer or whether you're having trouble actually finishing books or doing anything, is just to not be too hard on yourself and keep doing the things that are gonna like nurture your soul in some sort of way. And if that means like watching Star Trek because it's an like optimistic view of society, then like watch Star Trek instead of write, and like don't feel bad about it.
Yeah, that's such great advice. I think that's and I mentioned this at the start, I'm just, all of these people out there who are joking about, oh, now you can write that novel while you have all this time. And it's like, stop putting pressure on all of us to create like some great piece of work right now. Can't we all just deal with the anxiety and how scared we are and how uncertain things are without feeling like we're also supposed to be in our little, you know, studio painting the next Matisse or whatever. My plan actually for myself as a writer is to, because I have about 40,000 words of a novel written, is that I'm going to start reading, yes, angry too, Tony, that I'm going to start reading through it, like just reading it, because I feel like maybe that'll ease me into it. Maybe just starting to read what I've already written will make me feel a little like more comfortable with it, and it'll inspire me to write something new. Kelsey or Evan, you got any tips?
I've been journaling a lot, and I think it's interesting. I saw this tweet that was talking about how like the things that we write about this time in history could be eventually like primary sources for future historians. And I thought that was interesting because I'm like, oh, this is, as you know, as writers and as artists, we kind of have this kind of unique space now to create art and create some kind of like historical text about what it's like to experience a pandemic in these times. So I'm kind of I'm doing it for like future Kelsey, but also like hoping that maybe it might turn into some good in the future. So a lot of journaling, and I've been feeling very inspired to write, but so far it's just been like day one, like this is what happened.
I love that. That's really cool that you're doing that.
Yeah.
I think that's a really thoughtful way to approach it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For me, my creativity has just completely plummeted. Now that I'm stuck in the house, I just can't get myself inspired to sit down and actually write something. I'm very much looking forward to next week to learn some tips and tricks on how to trick my brain into wanting to work again. But
I wouldn't be surprised if it's a panel discussion with a lot of writers talking about how they're not writing right now. But if nothing else, maybe it'll make us all feel like we are in this together.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's 7:43. So I think that barring any additional questions, we might just go ahead and shut off our videos, but leave the chat open until 8 o'clock in case anyone wants to add anything to the conversation or share something with the others, share book recommendations. We'd love to hear more book recommendations. We're going to compile a big list of all of them. But oh yeah, all members are invited to everything we're doing, guys. So for sure, that's a great question. So just share the links with, share the RSVP link, which is on our website. It's always on our calendar on our website with anyone and everyone. We ask that they RSVP just so that we can grab their email address and be sure to send them the link to the webinar, but also make sure they get the follow-up stuff like the list of books and that sort of thing. We didn't do a book giveaway tonight, guys, because we just, I forgot. So we'll do it, we'll do it again in the future. But mostly, thank you so much for joining us. We love being a part of a community that can still get together like this. And we're I'm getting inspired for things that we could be doing even when we're all able to leave our homes again. But also a big thank you to Sam and Kelsey and Evan for all of their hard work putting all of this together. Evan is uploading stuff on our YouTube channel, which we'll send you information about, guys, because we're adding some original and free videos that you can watch, including recordings of older online classes, and other things, but also a big special thanks to our special guest, Richard, for being here and for everything he's doing with the Writers League in this time to get us ready for that conference. And also buy his book, guys. Let's support Richard Santos. And it also just sounds like a killer novel. So thank you. I'm going to stop talking. I know you never thought it would happen, but I'm going to. Let's say goodnight to Chester, everyone. Good night, Chester.
Good night, Chester. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
And we'll see you guys. We'll see you soon. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.